Being 7:02, I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting for Wednesday, May 19th, 2021 to order. First order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the review of minutes for May 5th, 2021. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Motion made, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Next up, we have a new license public hearing for 363 Main Street. Deborah Sargent doing business at Vertical General Store. Please come forward. Well, could you just state your name and address for the record, please?
Deborah Sargent, 82 Pearl Street, Clinton.
Terrific. Can you just fill us in a little bit on what you're hoping to do?
We reopened the Virgin Market as Vertical General Store with a deli and convenience.
Terrific. This being a public hearing, I'm going to open it up to anyone in favor of this proposal. Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to anyone in opposition of this proposal. Seeing none, I'll open it to the board for questions or comments. Hearing none, it's a pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant the beer and wine license to Deborah Sargent, DBA Vertical General Store.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made, second. Any discussion? Looking forward to getting up to the Italian sub. I'm hearing all about it.
Hearing great things about it.
Sorry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Good luck.
All right.
And maybe it would help if you referred to it as the old Corbabies Market.
Next up, I'm going to have to wait for Mr. Lewis. We have a draft warrant for review for the annual town meeting scheduled on Monday, June 7th. Okay, Bob? Could you just let Mike know we're on the town meeting? Most of it is what we talked about at the last meeting, but I know he's filling in some numbers, especially for closing things out. And Michael, we're at the town meeting warrant now? Yes. So, as I told the board, we went blow by blow last time. Is the okay.
I think maybe just getting, maybe just clarification on some of the new items that we're talking about. So the first eight articles are all standard articles.
Hold on a second, Mike. You can go here. Yeah. We gotta hear you. We gotta get you down back there, all right?
So,
Let's go. Go ahead.
so the first eight articles are all the standard articles that are on every year. So those should be good. Then Article 9 was the board we had at the last meeting with just some unpaid bills. And Article 10 did add some items to this. This is really the articles that we're trying to close out. And looking at meeting with the town accountant, any of the article balances that were from borrowing articles need to be closed out and can only be used for debt, to pay off debt. It can't be used for repurposing. You would have to repurpose them individually for another loan that can be used for the same term that loan was borrowed for. So it gets kind of complicated because some of them are small balances. So what we thought is that the town accountant is able to close that out herself under the Municipal Relief Act to be used for debt. So if there's a question on any of those that we want to maybe repurpose in the future, we can hold off on having the accountant close those off. So what it leaves us is to looking at the general fund accounts, and there will be a number, like there's a small balance on a landfill monitoring from 04. There's a balance on some prior year bills that weren't needed, a message board that we never spent. There's $13,000 for some land easements for an intersection project, that's all done. So those ones that are all closed projects, we'll add to this list and close out anything that we can to the general fund that's available. On the list, there are a number that are recent articles from the last couple of town meetings that are still pending. And then there are some older projects that, like there's some facilities projects that with the new director being hired, that he's actually getting that work finished up. So, one of the paramedic study is done, so that one will be on this warrant on this town meeting as well too. So that'll be on here. So if the board is okay with just allowing myself and the accountant the event today on it, just to wrap up whatever is is definitely closed and not being used, we'll add to that article, and then we can finalize the solicitor if the board is okay with doing that. Fair enough. So then the next article was to rescind the borrowing authorization from 2016. This is when there's an authorization that's never been borrowed or no money spent against it, then we need to go back and have town meeting rescind that so we can take that off the books. This was for the purchase of the Select property, open space off of Chase Street. There was a state grant that came in. This authorization was given in the event that we didn't get the state grant. State grant came in, and we used that to buy the land. So that can now be taken off the books. So those two articles, and then, like I said, we'll look at the other borrowing article to close out some to debt. I think it's a good process to start, and I thank Selectman Kobus for going through that exercise, and I think it's a good process that yearly these become hopefully annual articles that we can close out any of these small balances. We're just kind of carrying them on the books in open accounts that keep rolling over every year, and I think we need to clean up what's old and not being used, and if the project is done, not kind of try to develop a project in the future for it, just close it out, and if a new project comes up, come back and ask for the money and justify the cost. So I think it was a good project to start, so thank you. The next is the looking to make appropriation to the Health Insurance Trust Fund. There was the discussion between subcommittee of doing $100,000. So if everyone's still comfortable with that number.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. Just if we were to increase that number by $50,000 for both that and the stabilization fund, would we still fit that into the use of free cash?
Well, I think we could. The Finance Committee is looking at right now the possibility of borrowing the feasibility study. So if that gets borrowed, because initially we were looking at using free cash for that. So if that gets borrowed, then there certainly would be room to use some funding for this article.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we amend that number to $150,000 for both that, the trust fund, and the stabilization fund.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
So, is that the ideal number?
The ideal number is much higher. Well, stabilization can be anything you want it to be. Over the last 10 years, we've pretty much put $100,000 in every year. There were a couple of hiccups along the way, but that's been the tradition. But because of the way we budgeted last year and the other nuances that lead to free cash, I think and the fact that, like I said, the Finance Committee is looking at borrowing that the $1 million or whatever it's going to be, we've still got free cash available. And putting it into these two accounts, the stabilization fund is the town's rainy day fund. We're not spending it, we're saving it. And the same thing for the Health Insurance Trust Fund. It's a liability that we have that is projected to be much higher than $100,000 a year is going to address. So I think on that one, it's more of a token contribution.
So would it be prudent to increase that, or is it just?
I don't think we want to Right, that's why I'm proposing 150. I mean, we could be putting 2 million in to be realistic, and I think we've struck a pretty good balance over the years, and I just saw the opportunity that we could increase it a little bit this year. That's why I made the motion.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment too, is yesterday we had our bond rating interview with the Standard & Poor's, and I think they really appreciate seeing that the town, the board have established a trust fund, because then that's a dedicated trust fund that has to be used for that purpose. So since it was officially voted town meeting to have a trust fund, and there's annual considerations of putting money into it. So right now, we're able to afford health insurance costs on a pay-as-you-go process every year in the budget. There will come a point it intersects as they're projecting, 20 years down the line or whatever, that the annual cost for retiree health insurance and active employees may be more than what the budget could support, and then this trust fund can help offset those costs. But for right now, we're nowhere near that concern, but the markets look out way ahead, and I think they always make comment, and that's always the question they ask, what we're doing with OPEB. So by saying we have a trust fund, by saying that the policy has been in the culture between the Selectmen and Finance Committee to put something in every year, that satisfies their concerns on that issue. And going forward, there may be a need to up that as in years from now, but right now we're able to sustain what we're doing.
Yeah, to be clear, that's not a problem that we have a monopoly on. The health insurance number, it's pandemic. Sorry, it's awful. So yeah, I appreciate that we're making an effort, and I think we're actually making some good strides with stabilization fund too, where some communities don't do that. We're with this, I think it's going to get us in that area where we're supposed to be, and so hopefully that's going to.
Exactly. I think they hope to see auditors always say about 5%, 3 to 5% stabilization fund. We're getting pretty close to that. So I think it's good what the boards have been doing, and it's even better to see the discussion by the board of recognizing this, because again, with Standard & Poor's, they always say, what is your discussions with the governing board? What are your policies? What are your projections? And I think by just having these discussions, it's a really a positive benefit when the markets look at us to borrow. So the next meeting in 2 weeks, the treasurer will be coming forward with a bond to borrow whatever is left outstanding of a temporary project will be put to a long-term bond because the rates are so low right now. So we're hoping we'll find out on Monday what our bond rating is, but the treasurer will be here next month. So all this work goes into that culmination of that project of getting a good interest rate, good bond rating, good interest rate when we go out for the long-term borrowing. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor to up this from 100,000 per to 150,000. Yeah, we got a second. Any good discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
So it was 150 for both, right?
Yes, please.
Good, thank you. So those are the next two. The next article is just the landfill retained earnings, putting money into the capital infrastructure fund. So every year, we're trying to take some surplus from the landfill project and put it into the capital fund. So the DPW superintendent feels comfortable with $3.2 million this year. The next article is funding of the PEG access, the community television account. I think what I'd like to see maybe going forward in the future, now that the town has hired a director in that position, is maybe transitioning this into a budget line, a line item, a department. The budget department is part of the regular line items in the budget and can break out kind of additional expenses instead of a lump sum. So we'll try to work on that for next year's budget. The next two are the retroactive articles for negotiations for fire, which was first, and then police, which we just finished up a couple weeks ago. In the following, Article 18 is the money for the feasibility study for the school. The after review by town solicitor, we sent this article to the MSBA, and they had approved the wording in this article, so I think we're good to go on that. The next article is transferring money, again, from the landfill surplus into the landfill closure reserve. As the board talked recently with the superintendent of public works, the DEP is looking to try to have that project wrapped up by the end of this year or by this time next year. So this will be money that will be transferred into the closure line item of that account to try to finish the capping project. The next article is then appropriating that money, so it's putting money into that line item, and the next article is actually appropriating the money to do the work. So one is to go from one account to the other, and then the next article is to get the authorization to spend it. So Article 21 is $2 million that the superintendent is looking for money from the capital stabilization fund for road resurfacing projects. So that would be to try to keep on an annual program of doing some major road work for $2 million, if that's acceptable to the board. The next article is $2 million, which would be borrowed from the water sewer. It's for sewer system inflow and infiltration improvements. So based on a study that was done, they identified a number of major repairs, and this money would be a borrowing article that would be repaid through the Water Enterprise Fund to get this work started. The next article is kind of repurposing funds from the 2019 town meeting. There was funds used for a drainage improvement project. That project was closed out. There was still some money left, and there's additional stormwater work under that MS4 stormwater permit through the federal government. There's continued milestones that we have to meet. So the superintendent was just asking to repurpose that project to other stormwater work, since it's all similar type use.
One comment. I was trying to look at that article back in 2019. I don't think it was borrowing. I think it was free cash.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking for 20. But 24, 20 when you apply to borrow. No, I don't think it's borrowing. I just have a question.
Oh,
It
okay.
came from free cash. Look at it, it's just free cash.
Oh, okay.
So I think back in 2019, we received that funding, I think the money came from free cash.
Oh, really? Okay. We'll have to check on that.
No, there's more than here. Back in this article in 2019, I think it was approved coming from free cash. So if that was the case, really no money left as a note because it wasn't a note of the bond we used to fund it. So this article wouldn't be applicable if that was the case. I'm not sure. Based upon notes I had that article a couple of years ago, it was free cash.
But if there was a balance of even a general fund appropriation, then that money would have to close out before it's repurposed, or could it be? Yeah.
I assume it still would be sitting there. I don't know how much this is.
Yeah.
We can
Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, we get, I mean, if it's appropriate, if we want to leave it on, if it's okay with the board, but there may be a provision that if an article funded with general fund money can be transferred to another purpose, it would need town meeting approval, but I think we can, so we'll check the municipal guidelines, but I think it might be okay.
Okay.
So, the next one, the next two, actually three, are just vehicle requests from different departments. One is for F-550 truck for the public works, the same F-550 truck for facilities, and I don't know if I had it on here. I thought we put on the, I'll have it on this draft that I have, but just to add in the next article, should be $60,000 for a vehicle for the fire chief. This was in the budget, so I think it was, discussed that we were going to pull it out of the budget and put it as an article for free cash. So we'll add that in there. Yeah, I think I do have that as Article 26. So this must be you don't have that on your draft, do you? No. So I think this was a prior draft. So we're going to add the fire chief vehicle on that article, if everyone's good with that. And then the next was, this is to ask for the board's discussion on the next article, would be funding for downtown beautification projects once the new downtown is completed, renovations. So initially the number was 75, but I think through discussions in this budget subcommittee, they talked about maybe bringing that to 100,000. So if that's good with everyone for 100,000. All right. The next article is repurposing.
Michael, hold on. Question. As we go through these articles right now, our intention is to recommend using free cash for paying for most of this stuff.
Right.
And I just want to clarify for everyone that doesn't know, we have a significant amount of free cash this year, which, like I've said before, is never free, but we have it because of the good planning of Mr. Tumalo and the Finance Committee and this board last year when we set our budget up to succeed, not knowing what the COVID crisis was going to do to the community. And we had a lot of reserve built into it, held back on spending using free cash that year. And that's the reason we have it available now. It's not like some kind of windfall we got. It's from good planning, preparing us for the worst case this past year, which thankfully didn't come.
Yes, thank you. The next article is looking to repurpose money to the Rochester Farm project. The Rochester Farm, they put in an article this year to try to do some ADA improvements to a parking lot and to access to the pond up at Rochester Farm. They were going to come forward asking for funding for that, but there is a balance left in the article that purchased the property, and part of the bonding that we're doing at the next meeting that we'll bring forth to the board, we're refinancing some old bonds because the rates are so low. So we've got significant savings for the balance of the term of those bonds to refinance them. So this was one of the projects that was part of one of the there are two borrowings that were done with multiple projects within them. This was one of the projects that was in the refinancing. We can't have any balance left in an account if we're going to refinance that. So we can't have a balance in our bank of a borrowing, and then we're going to refinance that borrowing with money that's sitting in our savings account, in our bank account. So they said we need to find a way to close out those balances before we refinance. And some of these refinancing are going to save us, I think $53,000 on one and similar or more on the other. So there's significant savings. So since the Rochester Farm Committee and the Conservation Committee was asking they were looking probably for $100,000 or better to do that project, that if we close out this 144 to them, they can then look to do other projects at that site that they were going to do in the future, that they could maybe do now with that. And it would help us in the borrowing as well, too. It would help them do the work that they need to do, and it would help us so that we can refinance the overall bond that we want to refinance. So, otherwise, we'd have to come up with an additional appropriation for that article for them. Because I think they gave an initial cost was like 90 or 100,000, but then they were concerned that was a little low, so they were going to try to bump it up. So 140 might be a little bit more than the initial project, but it would give them some money to maybe expand on some other things up there. So the next article we talked about the last meeting, kind of just that house cleaning about adopting roads that the town is currently maintaining. Some of them are private roads, but the town maintains them right now, so we're just going to put those on the books of the town. The next article is the fire chief had submitted for the special town meeting that we kind of try to limit the articles back in November, and this would just be accepting of a state statute to provide for smoke detectors being in sleeping areas once that property sells. So as part of the inspection, when a property is being sold and bought by a new owner, that they would have to make sure there's smoke detectors there. The next is bylaw, change the personnel bylaw, as the board discussed, I think, at the last meeting. These next two articles are personnel bylaw changes. One is to have the town administrator be the entity to approve starting rate for new appointments under the bylaw. And the second is to clarify that the Board of Selectmen are the appointing authority for members of the Personnel Board. So, the next article is a amendment to the bylaws, and haven't completed the language yet, but this was the one the police chief wanted to add another lieutenant, but we're working on language that's going to kind of broaden the requirements of the police department, so it's not actually listed in stone as to what their command staff is. That will have more broad language that there be command staff as approved by the Board of Selectmen or police chief, or however we kind of finalize that language. So we don't have anything to share on that right now. The next article is a bylaw. I'm sorry, that's repeated. I don't know what I have a repeat in there, but the next one is a bylaw to eliminate the caucus, the numerical requirement. I'm sorry. This is to eliminate the caucus. The next one is to eliminate the numerical requirement for a quorum. And then the next article is an article to amend some of the dog laws, bylaws that are in town. The animal control officer did offer a new article since the board's last meeting, based on some some ongoing complaints that he's having with barking. So the first section would be to require that all dogs under the 24-hour leash law, that they be physical restraint of the dog, so that they're not able to get off property or get away from the owner. Then it provides a definition of what restraint would mean. The next section would be upping the fine for anything over the second offense. For the third and subsequent offenses of violation of the leash law would be, instead of $50 for every offense thereafter, it would be $100 for the third offense and more. The next article is talking about the adding the same fine for dogs that don't pick up, for owners that don't pick up dog excrement from public property. So currently there's a bylaw that people are required to pick up after their dogs. And this here, again, the same third or subsequent offenses would increase that from $50 to $100. The next one is looking to increase the fine for unlicensed dogs. And that's increasing that from $15 to from $25 to $50, which is in conformance with the state statute. And then also every period after the deadline, kind of increasing the fine every month if people don't get it done by the March 31st deadline. And then the new article that was brought up was the setting a fine for barking dogs and a limit on the amount of time dogs can be left unattended barking outside, and then a fine schedule similar to the leash law and the excrement law, same fines of $25, $50, and $100. So this would be that during the day, the dogs can't be left unattended barking continuously for 30 minutes during the day of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then at night from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. Overnight, it can't be any more than 15 minutes. So there are 2 cases that are pending that the animal control officer wants to bring to the board of excessive barking complaints and noise complaints that he's been trying to address. So he's asking if a bylaw could be put in to give some other tools for enforcement. The next bylaw is from the Department of Public Works, putting in for illicit discharge detection. A lot of this, again, is in conformance with the stormwater rule, federal stormwater rule that we have to do. And some of this is, this one is a little bit lengthy, but then the other one is even further lengthy, even more voluminous than the first one, if that's a word. So it's just requiring that we have a separate storm sewer system. So, and this one is quite long, number of pages, and then we jump into the zoning changes, the zoning bylaw changes, which would be one dealing with Connex containers, one dealing with parking requirements, and another with eliminating existing lots. And I know Mr. Duffy is here, not to put him on the spot, but if there are any questions about what some of those mean, I know Mr. Duffy works with the planning board on some of these issues. And then the last issue is a...
Michael?
Yep.
Phil, could you explain Article 41, the one that says to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Clinton by deleting section 3.2B, existing lots in its entirety? What does that accomplish?
Section 3.2.B is a remnant section from our bylaw from 1972 that has been out of conformance with state law since 1972. In fact, you'll notice that it's numbered differently. We actually changed our zoning indexing system in 2001. Which I can go in short, though, section 3.2.B is a legacy section of the bylaw that provides for legal building lots under 5,000 square feet in land if held under separate ownership. It's actually not consistent with the zoning act of 1972 that we had on the books at the time. And it's been around for almost 50 years now, and it's been used once, that's my knowledge. So I think it's probably time has to be to legal from.
It doesn't change individual property owners' rights to use their property as they might otherwise?
I actually like to find out if there's any lots that would comply with the requirements of the section. This only came up, the house that was put on the corner of Main Street Extension and Chestnut Street. That was a lot that actually complied with our section 3.2.B that otherwise would not have been a buildable lot under master supply.
So this bylaw change could make existing lots that might be buildable unbuildable.
Potentially.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure how many lots those are, because one of the requirements is that the lot be under separate ownership. So, if you have a lot next door to you, it doesn't meet our bylaw rules.
Thank you.
The final article was a citizen petition to change the use type of the Pepsi-Colas license from beer and wine package to all alcohol package. And the last issue that I have was talked
that discussed at the board at the last meeting, which isn't on the draft that you have here, but to put on another article for a home rule petition to look to a special act for Clinton to speak to the number of membership of the Bigelow Library, Public Library Board. So if that's something the board still wanted to pursue that as well too.
Did they vote on that? Have we heard back from the trustees, how they feel about it?
I have
don't
not.
remember in particular, but.
Yeah, I didn't get any feedback from them. I know there was a petition that was going around that was asking the trustees to sign, but then seeing as though it wasn't a bylaw change, they didn't submit that petition because it needed to be a home rule petition, not just a regular bylaw change. So I don't know if they signed it.
And not on this topic, I was going to, I thought I had brought up at one of our previous meetings, an article to eliminate the quorum of the annual town meeting. Oh, that is on there.
Yeah, it's on
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On that, I don't really have that much of a problem with eliminating the quorum, but it does, isn't there, I'm just curious if there's a compromise between where we're at now and totally eliminating it. I mean, could we have it set at like just a low, like 50 or 30 or something? I just feel, I just have a knee-jerk reaction to like totally eliminating the quorum.
My point for bringing it up and the reason for doing it is to stimulate attendance at the annual town meeting, whereby if people really care about it, they can show up and vote the article down, or anyone at town meeting could show up and amend the article to institute a quorum of 50, 100, or even increase it. Putting it on the way it's proposed would accomplish, I hope, stimulating people to show up and debate and articulate their thoughts on the subject.
Yeah.
So that's why I would rather see it go forward as eliminating the quorum and let town meeting have a say and adjust it if they feel the same you do.
So do we vote as a board to put like articles on here, or are we just allowed to, like, as an individual selectman just to?
No, we have to vote for it tonight.
Okay, on all these, all right. I mean, I agree with the sentiment, but I don't feel comfortable totally eliminating the quorum. I'd be fine with resting on significantly reducing the quorum, but I have a problem totally eliminating it.
Well, there are a couple ways we can do this. We can
Okay.
either amend the warrant now,
Yeah.
or you could propose an amendment on the town floor, which I think what the bill is anticipating.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's, I'll leave it up to you guys, or you can vote with.
Do it on the town floor.
Mr. Chairman, my intention is to get as much conversation and intellectual investment in making this decision by making it a dramatic decision, and then we'll get a good result at town meeting. And just the point, if we didn't have the COVID rules, we wouldn't have had town meeting or special town meeting. We'd be still bouncing around trying to figure out how we're going to get the town's business done. So the quorum is a problem.
Well, I mean, we would still, I think we would have got like 30 or 50 people.
Right, but without the COVID rules, we
Yeah.
would have needed 200. And
Right.
150 and 200 for special. So we wouldn't have been able to hold those meetings as successful as they were without the reduction of the quorum.
The reduction.
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
And I don't have I have no problem with, I am in favor of a reduction for exactly that reason. I just get scared when we talk about totally eliminating it.
I wouldn't, my point would be that
So it's working, because you're
we'll
making me
get more
nervous.
people there, more people with interest in the topic, and your suggestion. The other way, someone might say, well, yeah, all right, they're gonna reduce it, I don't care. I'm not showing up.
Right.
Yeah,
In all practical, just to spell it out, as people have seen, like,
take it to 20, so say you take it to 30, we took it to 20, which is 50%.
Yeah.
That's basically our board, our staff, finance committee, and I don't know, 5 guys out on the street. So,
Yeah.
like, you know, so reducing it to 15 is really zero, because we gotta be there anyway. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a matter of how we want to.
I'm thinking around 50. That's maybe what I'll propose at.
Sounds like a good
Yeah.
motion to amend the article at town meeting.
I'm fine with that, yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
In addition to that, I know that Mr. Ward had put on the website the details of the town meeting. Is it possible to maybe use a notify me to send out to anybody who's registered in the system to receive all that, the details of the town meeting itself?
Sure, yeah, and not only registered, we could even, I mean, if we could do an email to people that are registered, but then if you wanted just to tell people, you know, come to town meeting, we could do an all call to
Yeah.
people, that,
Yeah.
you know, for that too. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, the week before, think about that, the election, you know, it's about things people should know about anyway, but that's a reminder, so it doesn't hurt. So, I'll make it known.
So,
is that
the
it?
library article, or just where we are with that, or?
We do the library article? I mean,
Yeah, I'm comfortable, let the people decide.
yeah, I guess if the library wants to, if they want to tell us that night that we don't want to do it, that's fine, we'll put it on there just to be safe. We can always take it off.
So, Mr. Chair, so that reducing from 6 to 5, is that what you're doing?
Right.
That was the plan, yeah.
Was it because of my 5 divisible by 3 argument? That work?
Anything else on that one?
No, so if the board wanted to vote that warrant as approved, then I can finish up with town council and advertise next week, so.
Great.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the 2021 annual town meeting draft warrant, with the understanding that Mr. Ward's going to be working with the accountants and town council to fill in some holes that exist. Any discussion?
If there was something that we had discussed being funded as part of the department's budget, and if the finance committee does not see that it's feasible in that direction, is it still able to be added as a warrant article?
Yeah, I mean, without knowing specifics,
Not after this, not after the warrant is finalized, there's advertising and we're not able to change. And Finance Committee has that final say, that's their budget that goes to town meeting. But that doesn't mean that anyone can't get up at town meeting and amend the actual budget and put it back.
right. I know they took out some items, you know, as we talk about vehicles and one-time capital things to get out of free cash, but generally the annual stuff stays in the budget, but yeah, anyone's free to
But if I'm not sure, free to amend. I think
Yeah, that was
Mr.
funny.
Costa was asking about actually add a new article. That would be problematic, because there's no, amending an article is one thing, the public has to know that it's for public. We're going to add a completely new article. The moderator said we should, but we're lining up.
But if we're talking about amending the budget that we're voting on, right?
Right.
And do they have to provide a funding source for that too, or?
What's that?
But do they have to provide a funding source too?
Yes.
Okay.
So you
If they
can,
don't provide, it's a clear budget, we get a budget.
Right.
so you can amend the budget, but you can't just say, I want to create something. You have to say, I want to take something from here and move it to here.
Well, you could,
Yeah.
you could come out of town meeting with an unbalanced budget.
Okay,
If that's what happens,
Yep.
it'd be this board's job to try to prevent that, because someone could do that, and the issue would be to tell the folks, hey, this gets approved, we're out of budget, I mean, this thing's not going to be balanced.
right.
Yeah, so I guess you don't have to have a funding source, but I would certainly, if you wanted to pass, it would be recommended. Yeah, whether that's taking from someone else to pay for it or.
Sure.
You know.
Okay.
So.
Hey.
I know I was going to say something.
Any other questions or discussion on the town meeting warrant? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0.
Thank you.
Administrative business, we have a request from the Clinton DFW Post 523, requesting a one-day liquor license for an outdoor event to be held at their establishment on Memorial Day. Application closed. Any questions or what's the pleasure?
Motion to approve the one-day liquor license for the DFW.
I'll second that motion. Motion made, seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Old and new business. Mr. Duffy's here recommending award of a contract to Haley Ward Engineers of Maynard, Mass. in the amount of $133,240 for engineering design services relative to downtown stormwater infrastructure improvements that is being done through a grant funded by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Welcome back, Mr. Duffy.
Thanks. Very briefly, this is a follow-up to a study that was done by TZA Engineering to look at stormwater flows through the Untitled culvert. You know, twice in the last 11 years that culvert has failed. We had catastrophic flooding in 2010, when the flooding of the National River, and in 2017, causing millions of dollars in damage to Metro and Russian. So this money will basically evaluate the recommendations of the prior board and prepare construction drawings for any recommended improvement, and that one to go back to FEMA and have money for construction.
So the FEMA's funding this?
FEMA's funding, FEMA's funding 99,000 and change of this. The remainder, your board authorized us to submit that amount. It's a max grant of $100,000. And we require the negative scenario of 25% local match. In this case, it's actually 32% match.
Any questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the engineering contract for stormwater infrastructure project.
I'll second that. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. We currently have 2 vacancies for alternate members on the zoning board of appeal. Following individuals have received 3 statements of interest in being appointed as alternate members.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a suggestion, seeing it was three nominations, by 3 people entered into it, why don't we take the first 2 that put the thing, the request in, okay, right? And instruct Mr. Ward, okay, right, to put the 3rd one in his file. So they're all good enough to put them in, they all seem qualified, but I suggest take the first 2.
Do you have records of when they came in? Do you remember when they came? Can we sort them all by when they
Yeah, the
came?
2 that came in was Alan Roseberry and Maxwell were the 2. The other gentleman just submitted the letter last week to the zoning board. So he was the newest one was in there. So these are 2 alternate positions. So if they do have 5 members and very active and do show up at this event, some projects need supermajority of 4 members, and sometimes if someone can't make a meeting, it restricts them. So having the alternates would be helpful. And then a lot of times they'll transition if there are openings, that the alternates will fill the spot. But I think it's good having names in reserve because there's always changes.
Alternate alternates. So we need a motion on that? Michael, do we need a motion on that, or you?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Alan
I'll
Rose.
give John, that was his idea.
You're in Paris way, yes.
All right. Second?
Second.
All right. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for everyone's interest in this.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was in name on that, just so.
Nay, sorry, thank you. I apologize. Pop-up market initiative. Selectmen would like to discuss an initiative, the town to assist in developing pop-up markets in the downtown area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had an opportunity to talk with Mr. Duffy about the pop-up market initiative and what he, we've been talking about it for a while, and what he recommended. I have talked to the town administrator about possibly making pop-up markets a an objective or a goal for our economic development department. And Mr. Duffy suggested that if we discussed it as a board and if we were comfortable with asking the town administrator as a board to make that a priority for economic development, that it would free up, it make him more able to direct funds and energy and effort towards that initiative. And for those of us that are not familiar with what a pop-up market is, if anyone has been down to the matchstick market that they used to have down at Depot Square, essentially you take small businesses that are just starting, that they're not at the brick and mortar stage, you give them a venue to sell their product or provide their service. You also provide the opportunity for increased foot traffic to, if we were able to do something like this close to the downtown area, some of that foot traffic potentially could spill off into the other existing establishments down there. So everyone seems to be on board just in general with making this an initiative. We do have a member of the community from Discover Clinton who has stepped up, Jessica Spano, and she has volunteered to run one of these pop-up markets. And she's been working with myself and Phil, and she's very qualified to run this, and it's moving in a great direction. I know she already has ideas for 3 dates for the end of the summer and into the fall, and we're hoping if we can get her some more support, she might be able to increase those dates. The old matchstick market used to function Saturdays and Sundays from like 10 to 2 o'clock, I think, and they were a weekly occurrence, but they had been around for a little while. They were established. We're just trying to get this up and running right now. Unfortunately, the people that ran that had to move away from town. So we're just trying to kind of pick up and start our own because we think the idea is crucial. And then the next step from that is what you hope, because we're still trying, there are still some properties down on High Street that we're trying to fill, is if, there's 2 things. One, we could, if we want to take in that direction, you could actually rent out a property. So even in the wintertime, you could take some of those businesses, maybe the outdoors you'd have like 20 or 25. Maybe in the wintertime, you get that down to like 8 or 10 or something, but you have an indoor space downtown to still conduct that same market. And the eventual goal is if you're able to nurture some of these businesses, maybe they get to a point where they are ready to go into the brick and mortar stage. And then you can, hopefully there's a little bit of loyalty from them because you help them get their business going, and they'll be more inclined to try to find a spot downtown or someplace in Clinton. So I just wanted to bring this up to the board for discussion, just to see what, what all of our thoughts are on this. And if we, my hope is that after the discussion, we could make a motion or a vote to make the suggestion to the town administrator to make this a priority for the Economic Development Department.
Any questions?
It's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea to, just ties in nicely with the whole theme of what we're hoping to see on High Street.
Yeah, we've spoken informally about this, and we have a business community that's coming back from the pandemic, a 14-month pandemic, and a several-month construction project. And I think we owe it to them, to everyone in town, to consider every option to jumpstart them and get the result with the very successful downtown kickstarter. And so, whatever we need to do to give Bill the authority to control this, find some more fixing.
That's the motion.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend to the town administrator that he make pop-up market initiative a goal for the Economic Development Department.
Second.
Motion made, second, any discussion? Hearing none, thank you for taking this on. Thanks, Ms. Spano, for stepping up on this.
And thank you, Mr. Duffy, for all the great work you're going to do.
In advance.
I don't think we voted.
No, I thought I was done.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were like wrapping it up.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0, thank you. It's still on the clock with a proposal to move the board meeting to Tuesday night.
Yeah, this might be a short one. So that was my initial, because I think it's from, we're doing our best to, me and you, we're on the marketing subcommittee, and one of the things we're trying to do is to make the information coming out of our meetings more accessible. And I think it's unfortunate that sometimes we have a meeting on Wednesday and then the article on our meetings doesn't make it out until the following Friday. So what I was thinking of is exploring the possibility of moving our meetings back a day to Tuesday. Maybe that would give the item time to get the story in for Friday. Mr. Cleveland did reach out to me, and it was a very thoughtful, long answer, but I think that the short of it was, even if we move it to Tuesday, still no guarantee that it's going to make it for Friday. So unless we get like some sort of a gentleman's agreement or guarantee from the item, then I don't really see the point in moving to Tuesday. So I guess.
Yeah, that was the same understanding I had, that it's, it's, as anything, it's this space and the priorities, and it would still be after, it basically, the way it was with the old Wednesday, they're holding a space for us. So, I'm fine discussing it. I could say for myself that I would not be able to move to Tuesday until after baseball season's over. And seeing as we're going to have a new member by that time, if we want to bring it up.
Right.
And that person on so they can understand our meeting. So we're going to table it until.
Sure.
The election and baseball season's over, if that's all right.
In a similar vein to that, and we can revisit this later on, is we film all these meetings. It might be, I'd like to pursue or talk to the public access cable department about the possibility of taking our 1 or 2 hour meetings and trying to edit them down into a more consumable product for people, so that, because not many people are going to sit and watch a selectmen's meeting for 2 hours, but if we can edit it so like they get the highlights in 5 minutes, more people might, and that's probably about how much time people spend reading an article too. So, and if we do it that way, we could probably turn it out in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And I think just the quicker that people are informed, the better, because it's, when they're informed, they might want to address the board on things, and the earlier that they can get the information on something that happened on a meeting, the quicker that they'll be able to plan accordingly to do whatever they want to do. But we can revisit that at a later time.
Mr. Chair, I think, just to reiterate, we can't rely on the item to get out the information at this point. We've had some very important things that have been discussed over the last several weeks, and what's being published in the paper is still pretty light. So I think that the more we can utilize, whether it's our town website and YouTube channel, and just try to promote that as much as we can get information in a timely manner and thoroughly.
Yeah, and I think a good midway point would be even indexing what's on YouTube, so people could know that we talked about, moving
Sure.
meeting to Tuesday as, 1 hour in. So,
Right.
Instead of having to sit through the whole thing or fast forward, where the blocks are on this agenda. All it takes is lining up the agenda to put
Yeah.
time for this thing, and you put that in your comments or description.
Yeah.
That's just a quick way. If someone doesn't care about anything else and they want to get to, the public part, they can go right there. So,
And I think the item is just dealing with realities like a lot of other businesses are. So it's
not a good time to be.
it's tough, and it's just this isn't really intended to be like a knock on them, but we still, I think we have an obligation to do what we can to make sure that our local electorate is informed of what we're doing, and I think that this something like making a more consumable product for our meetings, I think would be good for us and for the town.
I agree. Mr. Chairman, even though it's irrelevant, I won't be here when this comes up again for conversation. I do want to express my thoughts. I think any effort we can make to get the information out to the public as quickly as possible, I'm fully supportive. I don't think changing the Board of Selectmen's meeting nights is going to dramatically change that. The other stuff you talked about, I think would or will. And I think changing the meeting night shouldn't be done casually. It's disruptive to people who ran for the office knowing it was Wednesday night. It's disruptive for the community that just knows intuitively that Wednesday night is a selectmen meeting and they can turn it on cable and watch it. And this room is used by other boards and commissions too. I think the planning board meets on Tuesdays, I could be wrong, but I think they do.
And the finance committee.
And so I would just caution against, with the change in the meeting night, with the expectation that it was going to change dramatically the newspaper coverage. Yeah, it's just my opinion.
I appreciate it, and I do echo that we need to work in our power, so thanks for making some suggestions. Keep going, Ed, to discuss creation of a subcommittee to look into.
Yeah, well, I mean, this isn't really, this is all of ours. I mean, this was something we voted on for, about 3 or 4 meetings ago. So, I mean, we voted to create the position, and I just think it's time to start talking about putting the subcommittee together, to start focusing on the job description and coming up with some timelines and things of that nature. So I don't really have any big statement or anything on this, other than I think it's time we should start looking at creating a search committee for this position. I mean, I'm certainly available for it, but I don't have that. If there's 2 other selectmen that want to be on that committee, I'm fine with that too. But I just think it's time that we start putting the job description together. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yep.
comment on this. Not to be an idea crusher,
But
but I want to, I don't know how to structure this, but first of all, during the budget subcommittee meeting, we made a strong argument of endorsement of the position, but there's no sure answer that the finance committee is going to approve it. So I would suggest that it's premature to be starting a search process or a development process for a position we don't know yet it actually exists. And the second thing, the more important point to me, is that this position, if created, is an appointment by the town administrator. It is not an appointment by this board. It is that is the essence of the strong town administrator decision that we made years ago that was approved by town meeting. If there's a search committee for an appointment that the town administrator is going to make, he appoints that committee, and it is advisory only to him. It is not the Board of Selectmen searching for the candidate. And of all the potential positions that the town administrator is expected to fill, this would be the most important one that he needs to be on board. He needs to feel that he has the confidence of this deputy town administrator or assistant town administrator position, if created, doesn't report to the Board of Selectmen. That position reports to the town administrator, and there should be absolutely no confusion about those roles, in my opinion. So I support the position, the creation of the position, and aggressively looking for good candidates. I object strongly to the idea that this board would be usurping the town administrator's appointment authority, either directly or indirectly. That's
a stretch.
That's my idea crushing for the night.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but we've had search committees for positions that you ultimately still appoint, right? I mean, that's pretty.
He's appointed those committees.
I'm okay. Look at it. This was to have a discussion about it. So, like, I know, but you're assuming that I'm trying to shoehorn in this committee or this position. So let me just be clear that I'm not intending to do that. What I am proposing is that we just start working as a group the same way that we did a job search for every other position that Michael appointed. So if I'm including Michael in this discussion with us, so I'm saying we voted as a board that this position was necessary. So I'm saying I think it's time to start working towards that position. And I understand that it's Michael's appointment. I just know in the past that we have had committees put together to hammer out job descriptions and to go through resumes and things of that nature. So that's all I'm proposing that we do. Now, the issue of if it's not in the budget, I mean, I have to plead ignorance. I don't really know. I mean, doesn't our unanimous vote for that to make that position, doesn't that elevate that position to some sort of a priority in the finance committee's decision making, or not? I mean,
If I make, just on
yeah.
that topic, I don't mean to interrupt you, I want to answer your
Yeah,
question.
no, I'm asking, yeah.
We meet with the finance committee as
Right.
a subcommittee to highlight, endorse, support the view of this board. And what they do after we make those endorsements or suggestions or communicate our strong priorities is their prerogative. And they don't necessarily agree with it. They don't tell us then what they're going to do. They bring back our endorsement or our suggestion to the full finance committee, and they vote on the budget item by item. I want to say that I believe we did made a strong case for this position. I dragged out my charter commission conversations when the town solicitor at the time came in, and instead of advocating for his, I think Sean and I did a very good job of advocating for the position. That doesn't mean it's going to be approved.
We
So-
did, and I plan on continuing that advocacy.
Okay,
I don't know, I haven't seen the budget, and they're meeting tomorrow to go over warrant articles.
okay. And so,
Yes, I think they're-
all right, and
Even if, it's my opinion, even if for some reason, and I'll be vastly disappointed if I'm getting whiplash from this because we've talked about it and it's been pulled back every year for some reason or another. So I understand, I'd like to see the budget before I get too upset about it, but even if for some unknown, even if for some reason this does get pulled back, I think it's even more important to have evidence going forward to show the need for this and what this position would actually do. Because I think a lot of people are still having trouble getting their head around why it's needed and why it would make life in town better. So
okay.
the more evidence we can have in that department, I think it will only help us. So
And I would-
agree that we need to start moving forward on this because we get to this point every year where
Right.
we talk about it for 11 months and say it's a good idea, and when it comes time to actually do it, for some reason or another, it doesn't happen, and then we find ourselves in the same position again. So,
okay. And to those people, I would say, look at the evaluation. Because that's part of the reason why we did our homework and we did the evaluation. We identified line items that were needed improvement. So that is the justification for this position. So if it's perfectly natural for people to have questions about why a position is needed, but I would direct them to the evaluation if that's really their concern as to what the need is for this position.
I understand where you're coming from. And we're on the same page. I'm just saying, having, as you suggested, some kind of body that goes through and looks at comparable towns, what they have for a position like this. The more we get from where what we have in our imagination right now and to what we hope is going to be one higher away from reality, I think that just serves us better. So I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but I'm backing you up on this, regardless of who appoints us.
Okay, so, and last thing, and then I'll get off this, so just so I understand this. So, if we as a board unanimously vote for the creation of a position, right, and then when the finance, we lobby for that with the finance committee. The finance committee is well within their rights, and this is just an example, so don't take too much out of this, but they could say, we think a teacher, adding another teacher is more important than an assistant town administrator, so you cannot get that, you get a teacher instead of a town administrator. That's within their purview, or their authority to do that.
Well, at the risk of having another story time with Uncle Bill, I mean, that there have been years in the dark past where the selectmen and the finance committee, correct me if I'm wrong, have presented dueling budgets.
Yeah.
So we've done our best, and that's why I think this, our subcommittee
Because-
with them has served us well, is that we try and hammer this out as best as possible without it coming to.
I would just think if it came from the select board, that it would, like, everything in the budget that's not contractually obligated would be available to be reduced, manipulated to make room for this position, because there's not very many things in the budget that are explicitly requested by the Board of Selectmen and especially through unanimous vote. So I would just hope that we would be, I just hope that we would be taking efforts to try to make that position a realization. That's all. But, hey, I'm learning.
So typically, when would the Board of Selectmen receive word on what's approved and what's not approved?
Do we have a plan for that?
We have a finance committee meeting tomorrow night on the budget, so they haven't made any decisions on anything yet.
So I think, Ed just hit the nail on the head on the last point. If this is a position that is valued by the Board of Selectmen, and I think that the finance committee needs to find a way to make it happen. We've talked about amending some of the warrant articles and the funding for those. And when we look at what we just amended, it's upwards of $125,000, and we're talking about not having money in the position, for something that the Board of Selectmen wants.
Yeah.
I agree. For clarification, there's funding sources there where I wouldn't pay for this out of free cash, where we've got some extra free cash and we're putting that away. I agree, and as Bill said, we have made our case. I made my case again this morning informally, and I will make sure that sentiments from this board are passed along to the finance committee after this week.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You don't have any more meetings where you get story time.
I know.
Story time. But aside from this specific issue, the budget process, as Sean alluded to, in years gone by, there was actually 2 budgets presented at town meeting. And the result of that was a new finance committee bylaw, or finance bylaw. And the short version of it is, it's the town administrator's responsibility to present the budget to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen approve the budget or amend the budget or insert their priorities in the budget and present for the whole town. They then, as a board, we vote to send that budget to the Finance Committee. The only budget that appears at the annual town meeting is the Finance Committee report to town meeting. Again, anyone's free to get up at town meeting and amend the budget, but the process is the Finance Committee sets the final budget for the town. And part of the rationale of that is the Board of Selectmen has, in spite of everybody's idea that we're the kings of the town, the school committee has different versions of that. The Board of Library Trustees have a different view of that. Parks and Recreation, they're all independent, autonomous elected boards, and they all have a different view of that. And the theory was that we articulate what's important to our section of town government. But the Finance Committee has to weigh our priorities against the school committee's priorities and all the other entities that play in town. So that's why it's the way it is. But the way it is the Finance Committee sets a budget and presents it at town meeting. So the final budget is town meetings.
Mr. Chair, just so could I just ask a question? Why do boards present their budgets to us then? Why do they every year come present their budget to us?
Because we present the budget to the Finance Committee.
Okay.
And the Finance Committee presents a budget to town meeting. And the only real budget that counts is town meetings budget.
Yeah, but even like the school committee, they have their own board. The library, they have their own board. And what you said was like, we only advocate for what we control, but all those boards come before the Board of Selectmen and present their budget request. So
Because we prepared our view of what the whole town's operating budget should be. That's the bylaw. And we submitted to the finance committee for their opinion, and they expressed
well, not just their opinion, it seems like, you know,
I'm not trying to
No, I
justify it, I'm trying to
just-
explain the way it is.
I've been on this board for 2 years, and sometimes I wonder what we really do, like, or what we're like, not what we do, but like what we're actually authorized to do. Just keep learning things that we can't, that don't have the authority to get done.
The
which is
second
fine.
part, again, I wanted to bring up is specific to this conversation. I'm also fully supportive of finding out what a good salary is, finding out what a good job description is. But the idea of this board inserting its opinions into the hiring process, the selection and hiring process, is completely against everything that we've established in this town over the last 10 years. And it would be, it's the town administrator's appointment and selection. And us trying to manipulate that process, or, well, even given the appearance of injecting our point of view with the town administrator is especially in the position of his assistant, it opens the door to all kinds of division and fractionalism in the administration of town government. And I'm not going to be here to argue about it. I'm expressing my point of view now.
You're here now. And so what, I just don't see what manipulation, by just bringing up something that we already voted on and saying we should probably start working towards it.
Yep. So what's the best path forward? Because again, I'm feeling frustrated too, and then we've discussed this for almost, I think, every year I've been on this board. So, and it's been on the budget in the past up until the 11th hour and taken out. So it seems like there's a disconnect somewhere between what we talked about, we all agree on, and it actually happening. So if you give, is there any advice on the best path forward for Rick Ringer?
The only thing I'm hoping that you avoid doing is, and it says it right here, Assistant Town Administrator Search Committee.
Okay, we can cross this one out. Like, what should it get?
We should, and I believe we've done it. This idea isn't new. It's been presented over and over and over again. The idea of the position is a good idea. It's something that this town could use. And I believe, I'm not going to repeat the arguments we made, but I think we did a very good job of attempting to convince the Finance Committee that the position is warranted. I'm just saying that it's a little presumptive to assume that it's going to be approved. I'm not saying it's not. They gave no indication, but
This is really the first I'm officially hearing that it not being part of the budget is actually an issue, so
And again, the budget's not finalized.
yeah.
I'm saying let's take that out and say it is approved, or say it's approved
Yeah,
in 5 years. How do we get from where we are now to having someone before the force here?
if it's approved, my view would be that you direct the town administrators to begin the search process, advertise the position, develop a job description to present to this board for review and approval, and direct him to fill the position as he sees fit. As he sees fit, in the past, he's appointed subcommittees that I think some of you have been members of to advise him on the selection or the pre-screening.
Yeah.
But us appointing his search committee is just completely inappropriate, and I would say a violation of his contract and the bylaw.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm just going off of how we've done these in the past, and you're absolutely right. It's within the town administrator discretion. If he doesn't want to have a search committee, that's his choice. I don't really care. My goal is just to make sure that we start moving on it, assuming that it's in the budget. So if Mike wants to do the whole search himself, as long as we feel that he's doing an adequate job doing the search, I don't care. But I disagree with this characterization that, I mean, all I'm doing is trying to go about these searches the way that I'm familiar with how we've gone about them in the past. Even though they've been ultimately the town administrator's appointment, and we did similar things with the superintendent. We did search committees when it's ultimately we had an athletic director search committee, ultimately his choice. Whatever we agree to, usually the way it goes is the committee whittles it down to like 5 or 3 finalists, and then the appointment goes to the town administrator or the superintendent. So that, I kind of take offense to being categorized like I'm trying to like shoehorn this search or like take control of the search when that's absolutely not my intent.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So can we, can a motion be made to table this conversation until after?
So you get rid of me?
Well,
No,
I mean,
actually, there's no point until we find out if it's in the budget. I agree that there's no reason discussing this if it's not going to be in the
no,
budget.
we'll get rid of Mr.
Yeah.
Crowley. I'm just saying that if this isn't funded, this conversation really doesn't need to take place.
Right.
If it is funded, then you can revisit it.
Agreed. Yeah. Wait.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarification. If it is funded, you can't sidestep the personnel. It wouldn't just be a search committee. We wouldn't just get a search committee. If Mike was going to go out and get a search committee, we can do that. But the personnel board has to classify that position. They have certain roles they play.
We can't lose sight of that either. The personnel board has to be on board. Yeah.
Right. What do you guys think of me?
It's not an easy process.
No, I understand that, but that's.
And we would. I believe the way the bylaws work is that the department that wants to create that new position does their homework first and comes up with their position, and then they present that to the personnel board, and we would still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But you would do that before you did a search.
What's that?
You do that before you started your search and actually solicit applicants. You'd have to have the personnel board.
Sure. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. And I think the initial thing I was just hoping to do is a job description.
Let's see what the finance committee will do. I'll share our thoughts with them, again, tonight or tomorrow morning, and, we'll, table this next,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
one last question. Is there anything else that we would find out about what would it be funded that the select board has?
As far as my best knowledge is, that's the only.
Well, anything in the budget is up to their review.
Yeah, right. So I wouldn't want to find out on the town floor that, okay, so it's sometime in between now and then, we'll know exactly what's going on.
And we're meeting before.
Yes.
Yes, we have a meeting.
One more story.
Okay. Ed wants, we tabled this before, talking about appointing members of this board's vacancies on boards that we oversee. Do we have a number of vacancies that would actually qualify for this?
It's on the website, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think there was some cultural council and a couple other boards that are open right now.
I don't think there are any that are significant vacancies. I think just one or position here or there on some of those boards.
Do you want to pick this up, Ed, or? I mean, is the
Yeah,
thought to fill every vacancy, or just make sure the board can reach a form?
I mean, the thought was to fill every vacancy temporarily until those vacancies can be filled permanently. It's just an idea. I'm not really gonna. I'm not wasting that much energy on this one. I'm expended. So yeah, it's an idea. We can talk about it. We can do it, or we can table it and not do it.
Table it after election.
Fine.
I still want to make a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
On this one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. I think we've done it in the past. I know we've done it in the past. I know Selectmen Jacoinski and myself filled in on the conservation. I don't think it should be done automatically as soon as there's a vacancy.
I agree with that.
We were appointed to it because they couldn't make quorums. They had, if one of their existing members wasn't available, they couldn't meet. And I think it should be used under, if it's an extended timeline, when they're having trouble, and we're having trouble filling it, I would encourage the board to fill those positions temporarily with members of the board. But I don't think it should just be it should be a case by case as indicated by the participation on those particular boards. At any time, we could be short a member here too.
Right.
And I think boards can function for a little while, but if it's a long-term thing, I think you need to fill it.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, Mr. Chair, if we do pick this up, I think that would be the first thing we would look towards, is like a time limit, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever or so many meetings. If it's not filled in a certain time, then a selectman would be temporarily appointed. And again, the point is not, the last thing I want to do is be on another board, serve on another board. We're all busy enough. But it's just that maybe me being bothered by having to go to another meeting would motivate me to maybe do a little bit more work to drum up some information in the community to get people to apply, so that we could get the board filled back to a 5-member board or whatever numbers.
How about I take a look at what vacancies exist and how dire the situation is on these boards, and then, as Matt said, we're going to have a 20% new board anyway.
Yeah,
so
it's right.
Put it all on that first.
Focus on town meeting.
Committee report, any other old new business, sorry?
Yep, Mr. Chair. Is there any updates on the chief of police process?
Currently, the candidates who took the assessment center have received their scores. They have 2 weeks to appeal those scores to civil service. I didn't get any notification of that, or the selectmen, Board of Selectmen's office. They went directly to the candidates. After that 2-week period, they then will submit to the selectmen an official list of a ranking of those candidates. And then at that point, it would be up to the board if you want to hold personal interviews or how you want to proceed with the appointment at that time. It'll probably be early June, early to mid-June, we should hear from civil service.
Any other old new business?
Just where are we at with, we had talked at a couple different meetings about putting together I don't know if a subcommittee is the right word, but putting together some form of a subcommittee to do some brainstorming ideas with the fire station on a couple of different issues, excessive overtime, the paramedics, the getting out of talking about civil service alternatives. Are we in a position to put something together, like
Yes.
appoint somebody?
It was, my understanding was Mr. Coas and Mr. Connolly, who were working in this, was unable to help with that, so I'm happy to step in, or if there's someone else who wants to do that. I've, spoken to informally, the chief, and they have I think they've chosen their side, so we're ready to go. I just wanted, and I wanted, if it was going to be me, I was going to talk about it after the meeting and see when he's available. Friday's open now, because we're on the summer schedule. I also want to check with town council to make sure, what the parameters of, what's we're able to talk about. So, I'm ready to go whenever. If someone wants to step in for me, that's fine too. So we'll talk afterwards. I just want to make sure that we're all going with this good faith, and we're not, since it's a sensitive thing. But it's my understanding that we're ready to go, and there's a lot that we want to talk about. So I'm looking forward to see what we've got. New, that's second committee reports. Cable committee's going to meet next Wednesday, I believe.
Yep. With the school.
Some school officials to see how we can continue to improve that collaboration. Any other committee reports?
Review committees meeting tomorrow.
Perfect. Anything else? Hearing none, we are going to adjourn into the executive session, 2 executive sessions, one under Article 2 and one under Article 3 of the open meeting law. We will not be returning to open session other than to adjourn for the evening. So I will I'll do a roll call vote to move into executive session. Mr. Ball?
Aye.
tune in. It's one you're not going to want to miss. Thank you and good night.